What is going on, everybody? If you need a big week out of your guys for week 3, you found the perfect video, because in this video I'm going to be giving you guys my list of the players you need to be starting this week regardless of your league settings. As always, if you guys are new, just make sure to be subscribed to the page, because if you're already here, you're looking for all these videos, and make sure to stick around to the end of this video for the It For The Biscuit play of the week. If you guys don't know what that is, you will find out very soon. But you guys know I really hate to waste your time in these videos, so the very first person we're going to go over that you need to be starting this week is Nico Collins. The real great thing about Nico Collins and why he's pretty much a good start every single week is that the Titans offense is absolutely atrocious and they are playing from behind in most of their games, and that obviously leads CJ Stroud to have a really high passing volume, which is good for all of the receiving options, and the staff really does not mind him passing this much and is kind of becoming their identity. CJ Stroud has averaged 45 pass attempts through the first 2 weeks of the season, and that is going to continue this week because they get a great matchup here against the Jaguars. And you might look at this and say, well, the Jaguars defense is kind of good. How is this a great matchup? And the answer to that is that the Jaguars are favored by 10 points over the Texans, and if you know football, that means the Texans are going to have to be playing from behind. You guys already know what that means. And if we know anything about Vegas, it's that they know more than we do. If they're making these sports lines, the Jaguars are favored to win by 10 points, and the game's probably not going to be the closest. And great news for Collins, through this high passing volume, he's seen 20 targets through 2 weeks, a great target volume. He is the clear wide receiver 1. Now, the Jaguars do have a bit of a tougher secondary than the defenses they've been playing, with the Ravens without Marlon Humphrey and the Colts, but that doesn't mean he can't produce. And if the high volume is continuing for CJ Stroud, there's going to be no shortage of opportunities for him. I really like starting him, and if he can come out 3 weeks in a row and put up 10, 15 plus points, he's going to be a pretty instant start every single week for us. But moving into the next guy for week 3 that we need to be starting, looking at a running back here, and that is Ken Walker, and I've been surprised how good he's looked. Maybe not in the box score, but definitely in the raw stats. But regardless of that, Kenneth Walker gets another great matchup here against the Panthers run defense without Shaq Thompson, and they're already bad enough. This is just going to hurt this line even more, and Bryce Young is also out for this game, so the offense is going to be less electric. Now, Bryce Young isn't one of those quarterbacks that you can take out of the game and it's going to be a huge game changer like a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow would be, but I'd still say he's better than Andy Dalton in this offense. But because of that, I don't necessarily trust an Andy Dalton-led offense to keep a game close with the Seahawks with how many offensive weapons they have. And that makes this a great matchup for Kenneth Walker because there's going to be a lot of rushing work and they're not going to stress the wide receivers if they're already up by a lot. He was used a lot last week in their game against the Lions, seeing 17 rushing attempts, and we can look at that game and make an assumption here that his floor is going to be at least 15 rushing attempts this game, and if it gets out of hand, I could see it going all the way up to 20. Now, he's not an almighty play like a Saquon Barkley before he got injured, obviously, because he's not going to get an insane amount of work in the receiving game, especially now that the Seahawks are implementing Zach Charbonnet and starting to get him rolling a little bit. They drafted him for the receiving role, but this early in the season, there's going to be absolutely no threats to Walker's usage in the run game, and he's still going to see a couple targets, but he's just not going to have that high floor of targets like we see with other running backs. But with a great matchup and a great offensive scheme, I really like starting Kenneth Walker, and he's an instant start this week. But I could not wait. I wanted to get you guys this It For The Biscuit play of the week, so here it is. Our play for this week is going to be Amari Cooper. Now, if you guys don't know what the It For The Biscuit play of the week is, let me give you a 2-second rundown of what it is. It's essentially a player that we need to be going through and starting that has a little bit more risk than your average player. It's not going to be a guy like DK or a guy like Joe Mixon that we would start every single week regardless. It's a guy that's a little bit further down the rankings, and some people are on the edge of starting him in a flex spot. Maybe he shouldn't be started, and he carries a little bit of risk, but he also has a massive boom potential and could absolutely save you a week. So the place you want to be starting these guys with confidence is if you're projected to lose by 10 or 20 points this week and you really need that last resort boost. If you're projected to win by a lot, maybe you don't start these guys and play it safer, but these are the It For The Biscuit big boom players of the week, and that's going to be Amari Cooper. Last week, we absolutely crushed with Tyler Lockett. He doubled his projections and got 25 fantasy points on the day. And in week 1, we had Alexander Mattison, who met his projection exactly. So we got 1 win and 1 tie. We're going to look to continue that streak here. But let me stop yapping and explain to you why Amari Cooper is this guy. And we can start this off by saying Amari Cooper has officially been ruled in completely for this game with no restrictions after his groin injury from week 2. But speaking of week 2, though, Amari Cooper was a game time decision for that contest, and he ended up playing and came out here with 90 yards, 10 targets, and only played 70% of the snaps. But this week, the Browns get the Titans secondary, who just allowed Keenan Allen and Michael Williams to run all over the top of them. Keenan Allen scored over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Titans have also given up the most points to the wide receiver position in fantasy football last year, and their defense hasn't changed. But the reason he's the risk it for the biscuit play and not just a complete set it and forget it start is because Nick Chubb is out for the game and out for the entire season, so I want to see how this offense can operate without a guy like Nick Chubb that can move the chains when they need to. Maybe this offense moves slower, or maybe they just rely on the wide receivers more, but he has a very, very good matchup against the worst secondary in the NFL, allowing the most points to fantasy wide receivers, and he could easily be the glue guy for Deshaun Watson to keep the chains moving. I could see a realistic world where the Browns use Amari Cooper early with short plays to get him and Deshaun Watson rolling for the game. Looking at the next guy on this list we got to be going through and starting, that is Mike Williams, and the stage is set for an amazing game for him as well. Last week, Mike Williams led the team in targets with 13, again against this Titans defense. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen combined for over 200 yards against the secondary, again looking back at Amari Cooper. But for this week, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen get an even easier matchup here against the Minnesota Vikings. This Vikings defense cannot hold anybody, and again, they are atop the list of the defenses that allow the most points to fantasy wide receivers last year, and that looks to continue this year from what we see. I mean, there's an endless amount of stats to back this up. Last week, we saw wide receiver 2 in Chris Godwin destroy this defense with a below average quarterback in Baker Mayfield. And while we know the Vikings have a really light defense, they are even worse over the top for long plays. And as we all know, that is exactly where Mike Williams thrives every single week, and the exact role that this Chargers offense likes to use him in. On top of the fact that Austin Eckler is ruled out for this game, so all of his targets and usage are going to be fed back into the wide receiver options. This game has one of the highest implied team totals of the week. There's going to be no shortage of upside for touchdowns and yards. You have to target this Vikings defense every chance you get, and we're going to keep going to the well as long as it has water. But the next player we have to be starting in all formats is Jordan Addison. Similar to Mike Williams, I love targeting this matchup. Now, the Chargers defense might be a bit tougher than the Vikings, which it is. Let me explain why I'm not really worried about this defense containing the wide receivers. First of all, the highest implied team total of 54 points of the week. A lot of points, a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns, but the Chargers defense ranks last in passing and big plays allowed so far this year. Obviously, the Vikings use Jordan Addison as a big play guy. He's ripped for like 40-yard touchdown before. Maybe you look deeper into the numbers and see JC Jackson is playing on Jordan Addison, and that might scare you. We can all agree that JC Jackson is a pretty decent corner in the NFL. You might think he's going to control the target volume that goes to Jordan Addison, but he's actually been decreasing in coverage efficiency since he got traded and since his injuries. So he's actually not that strong of a defensive coverage guy when you look more into it. But let's just say JC Jackson flows more towards Justin Jefferson in this game, and that would put Asante Samuel on Jordan Addison. But as we've seen so far this year, numbers-wise, he's a very fantasy point-friendly corner. The bigger question I'd pose to you is he going to see more volume than KJ Osborne this week? So far this year, we've seen this wide receiver 2 role get split both ways evenly between the two, but it really isn't that close of a split than it might look like just from the box score numbers. So let's look deeper into it so I can show you guys why he's a real good start, not just based on the positive matchup and script. First of all, Jordan Addison's snap share went from 56 in week 1 to 70 in week 2. And the opposite has happened for KJ Osborne, but Osborne leads the NFL in drop passes this year. And these two wide receivers' passer rating while targeted is completely flipped. Addison's passer rating while targeted is 150 and Osborne's is in the 50s. And for all my superstitious people out there, Kirk Cousins has looked great. He's playing in a 1 o'clock game, so don't worry about him throwing a Zach Wilson performance on us. I honestly would have made Jordan Addison the risk it for the biscuit play of the week, but he was a real surefire start in my opinion, so I wanted to make it somebody else. But that is going to finish off this video. If you guys did enjoy and make it all the way through, go ahead and drop a W in the comments so I know you made it this far, and it'll give you some good vibrations for your team to score very high points this week. And I'll see you guys in the next video after all of these week 3 games are over.